Crocodile looks at Luffy, a kid who's been beaten, stabbed, left for dead in the desert, and says loyalty is only for idiots and weaklings. And I paused because that line is doing so much work. Crocodile isn't wrong about the world. He's wrong about what matters, and drawn the most rational conclusion possible. Trust no one, use everyone, acquire power. The guy's not dumb, he's been paying attention. He just happens to be standing across a kid who breaks the pattern. Alabasta is the arc where One Piece gives Luffy a real villain. And by real, I mean someone who looks at everything Luffy stands for and calls it weakness. That's a different kind of threat. Every villain before this has been a bully or a tyrant. Crocodile is an argument. And the fact that Luffy has to beat that argument 3 separate times before it stays down tells you everything that this arc is actually about. This is the Alabasta Arc, and I have a lot of thoughts. Some of them are about how incredible this arc is, and some of them are about pacing that tested me more than I expected. Both things are true, and I'm going to be honest about both. This is where the Straw Hats face their biggest challenge yet, where several crew members get genuine solo spotlights, and where One Piece introduces a villain who, for my money, is operating on a completely different level than anything we've seen. It's also where I have to be honest about a character that I think is pretty popular. We'll get there. Let's talk more about Crocodile. Crocodile is the best villain this show has produced so far, and it's because he's constructed as Luffy's philosophical opposite. There's a reason The Dark Knight is one of the most well-regarded superhero films of all time, and the Joker is a massive part of that. A great villain is everything to a story. It elevates the hero, it raises the stakes, it makes you feel the weight of what's actually being fought over. I'm not putting Crocodile anywhere near Heath Ledger's Joker, but for the first time in One Piece, I'm feeling what a truly great villain does to a story. Every arc before this had antagonists. Crocodile is the first one that feels like the arc was built around him. Luffy gathers people through sheer gravitational force of personality. Crocodile uses people and discards them. Luffy fights for his friends. Crocodile says people who put others before themselves are fools. Luffy's power comes from connection. Crocodile's ethos doesn't involve trusting anyone. He's also terrifyingly competent. Operation Utopia, the plan to frame the king, to turn the citizens against their own government, to use Baroque works as a shadow army while posing as a hero. It's one of the most sophisticated villain schemes I've seen in anime. He could have just attacked Alabasta, but he made Alabasta attack itself. That takes patience, intelligence, and a complete indifference to human cost. He's not Arlong ruling through fear. He's not Don Krieg throwing resources and big weapons at a problem. And he did it while the people loved him. And when this plan starts unraveling, when Luffy keeps getting back up, you see genuine frustration. Luffy's persistence is a physical threat, and it's also an existential one. Because if Luffy wins, Crocodile's entire worldview is wrong. If loyalty and blind trust in your friends can beat calculated, self-interested power, then Crocodile's been wrong about everything since he entered the Grand Line. He tries to kill Nico Robin without hesitation when she's no longer useful. He seeks the Pluton, an ancient weapon that can destroy an island, because that's the only kind of power he believes in. Absolute, impersonal, beyond the reach of human connection. That's a philosophy, and the show treats it like one. 3 rounds with Luffy. That's how seriously the show takes this fight. No other villain has required Luffy to come back from death, rethink his approach, and then fundamentally change his strategy. Which brings us to how this crew answered the challenge. Here's something funny. Episode 102 is technically filler, and yet it contains a conversation that might be one of the most important in the series so far. The scene lays a philosophical foundation for everything the crew does for the rest of the arc. Filler or not, this one matters. Chopper, still relatively new to the crew, asks if it's normal for everyone to just do their own thing, and Zoro gives him an answer that crystallizes something the show has been building towards since East Blue. Zoro's version of teamwork. Individuals taking individual risks. You do what you can, the best you can. You stand up, risk your own life, and you expect everyone else to do the same. That's the deal. You work together by working separately. And then Nami also follows up with the emotional translation of the same idea. If you're alone, your strength is limited. You need friends, but those friends need to be trying as hard as you are. This philosophy is the engine of this entire arc. Every crew member gets a moment where they're outmatched and they choose to push forward anyway. Sometimes alone, sometimes in pairs, but always carrying their own weight. Not because someone told them to, not because they're following orders, because the deal is that everyone gives everything and they trust the others to do the same. That trust, by the way, is exactly what Crocodile's plan exploits in Alabasta itself. Operation Utopia works by destroying trust. Crocodile frames the king, turns the people against their own government, weaponizes loyalty against the nation that depends on it. His entire strategy is the inversion of what the Straw Hats are built on. The crew runs on blind faith that everyone will do their part. Crocodile's master plan proves that kind of faith at a national scale can be turned into a weapon. The contrast is right there, and I don't think it's accidental. One extra thing about Crocodile that I thought was cool was that ground seko literally meaning dry move to destroy the terrain near him. It reminds me a lot of Shigaraki's decay quirk in My Hero Academia, so I wonder if there was any inspiration there from Crocodile. Once Alabasta stops being a travel arc and becomes a war arc, every member of this crew earns their spot. Zoro continues being the load-bearing wall. He and Sanji staying back to fight the millions and marines while Luffy pushes forward is classic Zoro. He's always the shield. But this arc gives him something more. He cuts steel. Zoro identified his limitation back at the Baratie, the idea that there are things his swords can't touch. Here he breaks through that ceiling by learning to sense the rhythm of things, the components in nature. He finds the stillness inside the chaos and cuts through what should have been uncuttable. That moment is a milestone. It tells you the strongest swordsman won't be the one who swings the hardest. It'll be the one who understands the most. He also saved Smoker because Luffy asked him to, just following my captain's orders. The loyalty and respect in that line, Zoro doesn't question it. Luffy said save him, so he saves him. Sanji gets what might be my favorite moment of this arc, Mr. Prince. The alias, the phone call, the flex of it all. Here's a guy who can throw down with anyone on this crew physically, and his biggest play in this entire arc is pure strategy, using cunning to distract Crocodile and free the rest of the crew while everyone else is trapped. I love that about him. He's the crew member who operates in the margins, who doesn't announce himself, who just shows up having already solved the problem. It's so exciting to see him flex as a strategist when he could have just easily kicked his way through the front door. His takedown of Bon Clay is also a reminder that this crew has 3 elite fighters, not 2. And the moment after the fight, where he shakes Bon Clay's hand and doesn't want to kill him, that's the pirate code in action. Sanji sees a person, not just an opponent. Let's talk about my boy Chopper. Chopper proves himself. He says he'll do whatever he can manage, and he does. He uses his transformational abilities perfectly, taking on the millions in his combat forms, and then slipping past Crocodile undetected in his smaller form. He uses his ability to communicate with Eyelash to help the group later. Every tool in his kit gets deployed exactly when it's needed. It all goes back to what Zoro and Nami said about each member doing their best. Chopper heard that philosophy, internalized it, and then lived it. Usopp gets some great moments in this as well. When he hears that Luffy is potentially dead and Miss Merry Christmas laughs at the idea of Luffy being king of the pirates, something flips. His survival instinct, the voice that always says run, gets drowned out by something louder. Loyalty to Luffy's dream, that's the distinction. His fight with Chopper against Miss Merry Christmas and Mr. Four, two opponents they have no business beating, is the proof of concept. They rose up, they figured it out together, each doing what they could. And I can't forget about Karu and his Duck Squad. Karu has been incredible this entire arc. Let's get into a little more about Luffy. Luffy cherishing Todo's water is the first thing. A small moment, easy to miss, but it's Luffy showing restraint. He values what was given to him by someone who still had faith when faith was irrational. Todo digging for water in a desert where no water exists because the dream of Yuba can't be beaten by a bunch of lousy sand. Luffy carries that with him, and it literally saves his life when Crocodile shrivels his arm, and that water is what he needs to recover. But the real growth is strategic. Luffy figures out that water is the key to fighting Crocodile. He keeps growing as a fighter, and this time it's about thinking differently. He approaches with a plan. He straps a barrel of water to his back and he charges into battle, kind of looking like Mario from that game Super Mario Sunshine. And then the next version of Water Luffy, where he takes down all that water and basically inflates himself, is the most Luffy thing imaginable. Incredibly goofy on the surface, brilliant underneath. A plan that looks stupid and is actually the only way to win. That's Luffy's whole deal distilled into a single image. He may seem reckless, foolish even, but his heart and resolve come through when it matters. Cobra says it perfectly. That kid is weird, but incredible. Round 3 feels different because Luffy feels different. He's not fighting out of pure instinct anymore. He's fighting with intention. He wants to beat Crocodile's ass because that's what Luffy does, but his stated motivation is to make Vivi smile again, because they're friends. Gum Gum Storm. Luffy has reached a new level as a fighter, and the move feels like it. It's the culmination of 3 attempts, near death, strategic adaptation, and sheer refusal to stay down. And right after, we get a very poetic moment. Vivi looks up. Earlier, she looked up and saw Pell sacrificing himself, and it was devastating. Now she looks up and sees Crocodile launch toward the sky, defeated. The same angle, opposite meaning, from grief to relief. That visual symmetry is the kind of craft choice that makes me respect this show's direction. The orchestral score during this sequence is also perfect. It's classical, sweeping, and it's earned. It hypes the moment, but it also honors it. I wanted to touch a little bit on Ace as well. Before Alabasta really kicked into gear, the show dropped Portgas D. Ace into the story, and it's a pretty efficient character introduction. He's a division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates, and he's Luffy's brother. And it's crazy because I didn't really think of the idea of Luffy even having a brother to begin with, so I was really shocked. But he's Luffy's brother, and he's a fire-based devil fruit user whose power scale makes everything we've seen look like a warm-up. And the show is smart about how it uses him. Ace isn't here to fight Luffy's battles. He shows up and demonstrates a level of power that is staggering, but then he leaves. What he does in the margins, I think, matters more than the actual fire. The crew keeps commenting on the contrast between Ace and Luffy. They call Ace kind and thoughtful to a fault. There's an air of dependability about him that Luffy just doesn't project in any conventional way. They've clearly grown up together, they clearly care about each other. Ace even mentions that Luffy has been this way since he was a kid, that people just gather around him. He doesn't really explain it though. He doesn't seem to fully understand it either, he just knows it happens. What Ace really does for the show, in my opinion, is blow the ceiling off. We just watched Luffy go 3 rounds with a warlord of the sea and barely survive. Ace walks in representing an entire tier of piracy that makes even that fight feel a little bit local. The Grand Line just got a lot bigger and Luffy just got a lot smaller in comparison. Not to minimize the incredible fight and the feat that it took to beat someone like Crocodile, but we have a bigger sense of the mountain that Luffy is actually climbing. Okay, I need to talk about this because it affected my experience a little bit. The desert travel in this arc drags, and I mean it really tested me. There are stretches where I could feel the show stalling and filling space and circling the same emotional beats without advancing anything. And I did mention before that there was a very important line and technically a filler episode when Zoro was talking to Chopper about what teamwork is to him. So it's not to say that the pacing is completely irrelevant and completely ruins the story. It's just something that I thought I'd point out that it was pretty obvious in this arc. When Alabasta finally snaps into focus and the crew reaches Rain Base, the contrast is almost jarring. Suddenly the plot is moving, the stakes are real, and you realize how much time was spent just getting there. And I bring this up because I think the pacing just doesn't affect entertainment value. In my opinion, it affects character, and I think one character in particular suffers from it more than any other. This is just my opinion, and I want to be upfront about it. I didn't connect with Vivi the way I think the show wanted me to. I understand who she's supposed to be. I understand what she represents. A leader who loves her country so deeply she'd rather die than see a single person hurt. That's a meaningful character concept, but something about the execution, at least in the anime, didn't land for me, and I've been trying to figure out why. Part of it has to be the pacing, because the anime stretches this arc out so much, Vivi's emotional state gets repeated over and over without escalation. Every single confrontation with her follows the same pattern. I'll stop you, I'll stop this, I won't let you get away with this. That repetition starts to feel like a default mode rather than a dramatic choice. On Drum Island, Vivi felt more impressive to me. She was resourceful, determined in ways to move the plot. Here in Alabasta, the proportions feel really off. There's a lot of declaring and not enough doing. And I want to be careful here because I think there's a version of this character that works beautifully. Her standing in front of the rebel army is a great moment. Her escaping the Banana Gator is clutch. And her figuring out the cannon was in the clock tower, realizing they needed to cut the fuse, that was a legitimately crucial play. It didn't end up mattering because of the timer and Pell had to carry the bomb out himself, but they never would have gotten that far without Vivi putting it together. That's Vivi at her best. The scene where Luffy confronts her about not wanting any violence and tells her she can at least try putting all of their lives on the line together, that scene is phenomenal, but it's phenomenal because of Luffy, not because of Vivi. Crocodile actually calls this out in the show. He says idealistic people like Vivi take stands without knowledge of what's truly involved in a real fight, and Luffy agrees. So maybe the way she's presented is entirely intentional. Maybe I'm supposed to feel this friction, because Luffy reconfirms his commitment to her cause anyway, specifically because she's willing to die for it. The will is there even if the capacity isn't, and that distinction matters to him. And look, before some of you guys start typing, I know Vivi is supposed to represent the leader who fights with heart instead of power. She's a princess trying to save an entire kingdom without devil fruit abilities or like super impressive combat training. That's all totally valid, and I really do get that. I'm just saying that for me, in this anime, she felt a little flat. I didn't naturally get behind her the way I did some of even the secondary characters in this same arc. Toto, Igaram, Cobra, Karu, none of them have devil fruit powers either. None of them are main characters, and every single one of them pulled me in more than Vivi did. And that's not a statement about what she's supposed to be, it's just my honest reaction to how she comes across. But because of this, I am wondering, for the manga readers, is Vivi more effective in the manga? Because I wonder if the anime's pacing, the repetition, the drawn-out desert sequences diluted something that works better on the page. I'd love to hear your perspective. I want to also talk about two characters that surprised me in this arc. Smoker is trying to stop the Straw Hats, and on paper, he's an antagonist. But at his core, I don't think he's a bad person. I mean, cut back to that scene in Logtown where the little girl runs into him with ice cream. He's a Marine who cares about justice, and he's watching a pirate crew demonstrate more honor than his own institution. He tells Tashigi to rely on her sense of justice. He doesn't want credit for stopping Crocodile. He isn't too proud to admit the Straw Hats did what the Marines couldn't. At the end of this arc, he points to the Straw Hats as a good example, and for this show, that's a Marine officer doing something quietly radical. He's choosing truth over institutional loyalty. Luffy saving Smoker from drowning is perfect. Luffy doesn't see Smoker as an evil tyrant. There's no honor in Smoker going out that way, and Luffy takes things head on, not the easy way. You also get the sense that Luffy wants the eventual fight to happen on fair terms. That's sportsmanship from a pirate, that's the code. Bon Clay is also a really big surprise. He goes from being a Baroque Works officer, Mr. 2, to risking his life for the Straw Hats almost immediately. And it's not a slow conversion. He encounters their ethos, the willingness to die for your friends, and he just absorbs it. Like he was waiting for people who actually believed in something. His sacrifice for the Straw Hats validates everything the show has been saying about how Luffy affects people. Like Ace said, they gather around him, even former enemies. There's also a couple of great surprises that the show pulls off near the end of this arc. Alabasta wraps up, and the show just keeps pulling the rug. The entire arc builds toward a pretty obvious conclusion, right? Or maybe I'm completely wrong, but Vivi has been traveling with the Straw Hats. She's fought alongside them, cried with them, nearly died with them. Alabasta is saved. Crocodile is beaten. The logical next step, the thing any show would do, is have Vivi join the crew. She's earned it. The emotional runway is there. And as a first-time watcher, I don't think it's crazy to brace yourself for that farewell to become a welcome moment. But the show says no, Vivi stays. And it makes complete sense. Her purpose was always to save Alabasta. Now her focus is rebuilding her country alongside her father. She doesn't have the kind of overarching, unreachable ambition that drives every other member of this crew, at least not right now in this very moment in the show. Luffy wants to be king of the pirates, Zoro wants to be the greatest swordsman, Nami wants to map the entire world. Vivi's dream had an endpoint, and she reached it. Now she's got more to do, but I don't think it involves the Straw Hats for now. Staying is the right call for her character, even if part of you wants her on that ship. Not saying that cancels it out for the future, but in my opinion, this made sense. But then Nico Robin just shows up on the Going Merry, and she's joining the crew. I love this. The show built all of the emotional weight toward one outcome and then delivered something completely different. Nico Robin, who was Crocodile's partner, who helped orchestrate the crisis in Alabasta, who we've known as Miss All Sunday this entire time, is now a Straw Hat. On paper, that should feel so wrong, but it doesn't because the show planted seeds for it. Robin saved Luffy. When Crocodile poisoned him, she neutralized it. She kept him alive when she had no reason to. And then there was also this conversation that she had with Cobra where she mentioned some kind of overarching goal, something she'd almost given up on entirely before Luffy intervened. I don't have a full comprehension on what that goal is yet, but the show is telling us that it's big enough to drive a character forward. That's the same fuel that powers every other Straw Hat. And here's another thing that gets me is that by saving Luffy, Robin unintentionally saved herself. Maybe that's a coincidence, maybe that's fate. Either way, it's a better story than the obvious one. One Piece didn't give me what I expected. It gave me something more interesting, and I'm starting to think that's a habit. Now here are some closing thoughts to what I think Alabasta means. Cobra and Vivi have this ethos that a country is its people. And here's what struck me. Luffy arrived at the same conclusion independently. Bypass the structures, bypass the politics, go straight to Crocodile. The soul of a thing is never the institution, it's the people inside it. A king and a pirate looking at the same crisis, having the same instinct. The rain falls and it means something because the drought has been a running thread, because Toto dug for water that wasn't there, because Crocodile weaponized the dry land itself against its own people. The rain is resolution. The land started to heal because the thing poisoning it had been removed. Alabasta had pacing problems. The filler tested me. Vivi didn't land for me the way I think she was supposed to. I'm being honest about all of that. But this arc is also where One Piece proved it can sustain a long-form villain who challenges Luffy ideologically, not just physically. It proved every member of this crew can carry a fight and a thematic arc on their own. And it ended by subverting what some might call an obvious payoff by swapping the princess for the mystery and making the crew more interesting for it. Each passing arc, I love this crew more. Luffy keeps validating why he's arguably a pop culture icon. How can you not root for a character this weird, this powerful, this lovable? The whole crew came out of this thing wanting no recognition, no glory. They wanted to help a friend and maybe get some food. The world keeps getting bigger, the stakes keep getting higher, and this crew, this strange, beautiful collection of individuals who work together by working separately, keeps rising to meet it. I'll see you on the next one.